Everyone, this is Dawn. Welcome to my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to show you a couple of ink blending techniques. The first card I'm going to use a retired stamp set called Christmas Blessings, and then I'm going to use the Comfort and Joy card making stamp set and thin cuts, Yuletide borders, and fancy borders. So let's get started. I'm cutting a piece of white daisy cardstock at 4 by 5 1/4, and I'm cutting 2 of them because I'm making 2 cards today. So the first technique, I'm going to use regular Close My Heart inks, and I'm using these life-changing brushes from Picket Fences, but there's a lot of knockoffs available on Amazon and also some in cosmetic sections. So I'm tacking my white daisy cardstock down with removable tape runner, and then I'm using some of this masking paper from Judikins, and I'm going to use it. I'm going to cut use my thin cut on it to create a mask. So I'm using this stitched thin cut from Fancy Borders, and I'm going to run it through my Big Shot to create my mask. And then later on, I'm also going to cut the same shape using white glitter paper, and that's going to be layered on my card front. So I'm going to run this through, and later on you'll see me do this again, and I cut both the mask and the glitter paper together. I layered them and then ran them through, so that's an easier way to do it. So I found that out after I did this. So, okay, so now I'm going to take that masking paper, it's a low tack paper, and I'm going to lay it down on my card front, and I'm kind of figuring out where my stamps are going to go and how large of a field I want at the base of my card. So I'm going to take some Glacier ink, and this is just regular Close to My Heart ink. This is an older ink pad. The new ones are the magnetic style, but it's the same ink. It's a water-based ink, and I'm just swirling my blending tool on the ink pad and then laying down a light layer of color, and you can always add more ink and intensify the color. And then I'm going to go in with Sapphire, and I'm tapping it off on my glass mat first before I start putting it onto my white daisy cardstock, just so that I don't get fields of super intense color and blotches. And then I'm just kind of adding to deepen that sapphire color. It's going to be a night sky, and I'm going to have stars, so I want it to be a really intense sapphire. And then around the edges, I'm going to make it even darker. And I'm just wiping off that first blending brush with a microfiber cloth. And then I'm going to use black ink and go in from the edges and just deepen that sapphire color to make it just kind of a shade darker. Okay, so then I'm going to take some of this pearl watercolor paper. This one's from Brie Reese, and you could use white paint and just loosen it up with water, and or you can use watercolor paint. There's a lot of different options, or you could use your shimmer brush, your clear shimmer brush, and then just tap your brush on your finger and create little stars. Okay, I'm going to wipe everything down and get the glass mat out of the way. So now I'm going to get ready to do some die cutting again. So I'm going to cut my glitter paper, and I realized that I had it cut at the wrong size, so I've got it now. Now it's 5 1/4 inches wide. I'm going to put my card on a white card base and have a white border around it. So now I'm figuring out where to actually place the die cut on the glitter paper, and this is why I say if you layered them all together the first time around, you wouldn't have to figure this out and do it that way. But I made it work. I did the figuring out so that when you do this, you won't have to. So, okay, so I'm going to run that through. And I'm going through twice just to be sure, because I've got a few layers to cut through. So then I have my piece of glitter paper. And by masking, you don't necessarily need the glitter paper. I just wanted a little extra bling and interest on my card to have that there. But you could just leave the white base there as well. Okay, so now I'm just removing that removable tape runner with my rub and remove eraser. And then I'm going to take some black ink and stamp my images in black. And you can use, there's a lot of different options out there. I know this is a retired stamp set. But you could do like a tree in black, anything that looks good, like in a silhouette, just stamped in black can work. But I liked this one. So I'm just going to stamp all of my images in black and keep it simple. But I really like the way that the glow comes from behind. Okay, so now we're ready to start building our card. But first, I need my sentiment. So I'm going to bring my Big Shot back in, and I'm going to cut that Merry Christmas from Yuletide Borders using evergreen glitter paper. But just as I started to run it through, I remembered that with this border, it's easier if you have that double-sided tape under it to when you go to adhere it to your card. So I'm putting some double-sided tape under it first, and then I'll run it through my Big Shot to create, I'm going to create like a sticker. And this one, because I've got so many layers now, I'm running it through several times just to be sure that it cuts. It's a very delicate cut image, but it all cuts perfectly. You just have to fiddle with it a little bit to work it out, to work all the bits out, but it works. Okay, so now we're ready to start building our card, and I'm going to take my glitter paper and layer that on top. And my glitter paper's a little bit wider than the card panel there, the art panel, and that was intentional so that I can place it exactly where it needs to go, and then I'm just trimming off the excess off the edges there. Let's cut everything off. Okay, and then I felt like the whole panel needed to be popped, and so I got some craft foam, and I'm going to cut this down to just a smidge smaller than 4 by 5 1/4, and that's going to go underneath that whole panel. And I'm going to glue that with the white Tombow glue. That works really well with the craft foam. And it's a really thin craft foam. It's like just this, the thickness is about the same as the thin foam tape from Close to My Heart. I just like the way it looks when it's all solid rather than using a bunch of different strips of foam tape under there. So I'll get that down. And then I'm just going to put a block on it to make sure it sets up evenly. Okay. And then I'm ready to add my sentiment. And I apologize that most of this wound up being off camera. But I'm just peeling off the backing of that double-sided tape, and then I'm working that thin cut image away from the other part of the glitter paper. And I'm using my piercing tool to poke out all those little tiny bits. And then I'm just going to lay that down on my card front because it's sticky already. And the edges, it's a little bit wider, so I'm just snipping off the edges. And that's my card. I'm going to keep it clean and simple. I like this one. I think it turned out pretty. So here's some close-up shots. Okay, let's make another one. Now this one I'm going to use Oxide inks. Okay, so here's the process of cutting that thin cut image all together. So I'm layering my masking paper and my glitter paper. And I'm going to do this as a portrait rather than landscape orientation, and I'm going to have two snowbanks kind of layered on top of each other. So I'm cutting two of these pieces of masking paper and glitter paper layered. Okay. So now I'm going to bring my glass mat back in and we can do some blending. So I'm going to tack my white daisy panel down using that low tack or repositionable tape runner, and then I'm laying my masks on that card front and kind of figuring out where my stamp is going to be and figuring out where I want those glitter pieces to go. So now I'm going to set up my blending tools. So when you're using Oxide ink, the sponge tip blending tools work a lot better. So just keep in mind, I like the brushes for the Close to My Heart ink, the water-based ink, and I like the sponge tips for the Oxide inks. And so I'm just layering it. I'm putting my color down pretty much the same way as the other one, but because Oxide inks are opaque and you can layer them on top of each other, and rather than blending and having that transparency, you can lay color on top of another color with the oxides, and they blend differently. And I found with this particular card panel and blend, I really needed to do a lot of blending. So in comparing the two, for this particular type of scene, I prefer the Close to My Heart inks and the brushes, just because it's a more subtle look as far as putting your ink down. But this one worked. It's more chalky with the Oxide inks. And so I did the same thing with the black ink around the edges. Now this ink is the regular distress ink because I wanted that transparency, and rather than having black being opaque and layered on top, I want it to blend with that chipped sapphire color, just to make the chipped sapphire a deeper blue. So I worked all those colors together quite a bit to get this resulting panel. And then I'm going to go ahead and tap some of that watercolor paint. It's like a ivory, and it's got some shine, and it's like a pearlized watercolor paint. Okay, so now I've got my stars and my field, and then I'm going to remove my masks. And then I'm going to bring my other mat in. Okay, so now I'm decided that with this pearl paper, this is the specialty pearlized paper, and the image that I'm doing, this is one of those that is easier to cut first and then stamp, because it's the Christmas tree and the star. So in order to get it placed in the right spot, it's easier to go ahead and cut your image with your thin cut first and then stamp. So I'm going to heat emboss this image in gold embossing powder. So I'm tapping it with the anti-static pouch, and then I'm going to ink up my stamp in Versamark ink and put that image down. So my sentiment is the stamp here. So I won't have a sentiment, an additional sentiment on the front of my card. It'll just be this. So I'm stamping that down. And then I'm going to use my tweezers to hold my image over a coffee filter, and then I'll sprinkle that embossing powder. And I'll speed this up super fast so you can watch it heat and melt. So the sentiment, it says, a merry, merry, oh so very merry Christmas. Okay, so now I'm going to layer my glitter paper on my card front, and it's the same way that I did the other one. It's just two pieces instead of one. So I'm layering it, and then I'm going to trim off the excess off the edges. I'm going to flip it over and trim off that excess. And then I also popped my panel on craft foam as well. So I'm going to set that up. And then I'm going to put my Christmas tree down with some thin foam dots. And the last step is to add a gold glitter gem at the top of the tree. I'll have some close-ups at the end. So all these supplies are available in my online store with the exception of that retired stamp set. And you can go to the URL in the upper right corner of your screen. I appreciate you watching my video today. If you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button. And thanks for watching.